There is a strange confidence in saying the universe has no intention behind it. Not because that sentence is impossible to believe, but because it is often treated as if it costs nothing to believe. If this kind of quiet Christian reflection helps you think more clearly and seek God with more honesty, subscribe to Quiet Grace. Like this video and share it with someone who is wrestling with the same question. It helps more people find a calmer place to think, pray, and return to God. The question is not whether every atheist is foolish. That would be too easy, and it would also be untrue. Many people who reject God are thoughtful, wounded, honest, or simply unconvinced by the versions of religion they have seen. Some have watched believers use the name of God badly. Some have seen churches confuse control with holiness. Some have heard answers that were too small for the pain they carried. So this reflection is not a cheap attack on people. It is a question about a position. When someone looks at reality itself and says there is no divine intention behind it, what exactly has been proven? Has the absence of God been discovered, or has one interpretation of the mystery been chosen? That difference matters, because existence is not a small fact. Reality is not an ordinary object sitting quietly in the room. The fact that anything exists at all is already astonishing. Before we argue about galaxies, biology, consciousness, morality, or religion, there is this deeper wound in the mind. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there a world with laws, depth, beauty, anguish, love, memory, and longing? Why is there a mind capable of asking why? If a person says, "I do not know," that may be humility. But if a person says, "Therefore there is no God," that is not humility anymore. That is a conclusion wearing the clothing of caution. Atheism often presents itself as the neutral position. It says, "I am only withholding belief. I am not making a claim. I am simply waiting for evidence." And in ordinary conversations, that can sound modest. If someone makes a claim about a hidden object, a miracle, or a specific doctrine, caution is reasonable. But the deeper question is not an ordinary claim about one more object inside the universe. God is not being proposed as a missing planet or a secret machine behind the clouds. The question is whether reality itself is grounded in blind fact or in living intention. Once the question goes that deep, nobody is standing in a perfectly neutral room. The believer says existence is not finally accidental. The atheist says existence does not finally point to divine mind. Both statements reach beyond measurement. Both interpret the same abyss. Atheism can reject a bad argument. It can reject a shallow sermon. It can reject a cruel religious system. But rejecting those things does not settle the nature of reality. If I reject a counterfeit coin, I have not proven there is no real currency. If I reject a childish picture of God, I have not proven the universe has no author. The honest question is sharper. What makes non-intention the default? Why should a reality capable of order, personhood, reason, conscience, and beauty be treated as though purposelessness explains it better than purpose? Science deserves respect here, not because it replaces this question, but because it reveals how deep the question goes. Science can describe processes with breathtaking precision. It can tell us how stars form, how cells divide, how bodies inherit traits, how matter behaves, how energy changes form. That is not small, it is a gift. But description is not the same as ultimate explanation. A map can describe every road in a city and still not answer why the city was built. A musical score can show every note and still not explain why the song matters. A law can describe how things behave and still leave open why there are lawful things at all. This is where atheism often moves too quickly. It points to processes inside reality and treats them as though they answer the existence of reality. But a process is already something. A law is already something. A field, a quantum state, a multiverse, a mathematical structure, a brute fact, each one is already on the side of being rather than nothing. So the oldest question returns. Why this? Why anything? Why does the chain exist? Why is there a stage on which the processes can happen? When atheism answers by naming another process, it may push the question backward, but it has not made the question disappear. Some will say the theist does the same thing. If you ask why the universe exists and answer God, then why does God exist? That objection is serious enough to deserve more than a slogan. The Christian claim is not that everything needs a cause in the same way. The claim is that dependent things cannot finally explain themselves. A chair depends on wood. Wood depends on trees. Trees depend on soil, light, water, laws, time, and conditions. The universe we observe is full of things that receive existence, change, pass away, and depend on something deeper than themselves. If every explanation is only another dependent thing, the whole chain still hangs without a foundation. The argument is not that God is one more temporary item at the beginning of the list. The argument is that there must be something whose being is not borrowed, something necessary, something not waiting for permission to exist, something not produced by an earlier condition. The debate then becomes whether that necessary foundation is blind or personal, mute or meaningful, dead fact or living God. Atheism may choose a necessary brute reality. Christianity chooses necessary divine life. But notice what has happened. The atheist has not escaped metaphysics. He has only chosen a different final mystery. And this is where the word arbitrary begins to matter. Not arbitrary as an insult, as if unbelievers never think. Arbitrary in the deeper sense. If reality already forces us to stand before mystery, why treat the mystery as empty by default? If both belief and unbelief reach beyond what can be finally proven in a laboratory, why is disbelief treated as sophistication and faith treated as extra baggage? The existence of reality does not prove every religious claim. It does not prove every church right, every preacher wise, every tradition pure, or every believer consistent. But it does make one thing difficult to maintain, that God is an unnecessary question. The question of God rises naturally from existence itself. The world is not nothing. It is intelligible. It is fertile with meaning. It gives birth to beings who hunger for truth, grieve injustice, recognize beauty, and feel the ache of transcendence. You can explain some of those features from below. You can describe their mechanisms. But the more you describe, the stranger the whole thing becomes. Why should a meaningless foundation produce creatures who cannot stop asking about meaning? Why should blind matter produce minds offended by blindness? Why should accidental existence feel haunted by purpose? The Christian answer does not pretend to remove every mystery. It changes the kind of mystery we live inside. Instead of mystery as emptiness, it offers mystery as depth. Instead of reality as a cosmic accident, it sees reality as gift. John says it with one of the most direct lines in Scripture. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. That sentence is not a physics equation, it is a theological claim about the deepest layer of existence. Before anything created stands the Word. Before the chain of dependent things stands the one through whom all things are made. The point is not that Christians can answer every scientific question by quoting a verse. The point is that Scripture refuses to treat being itself as spiritually neutral. Reality comes from God. Life is not floating without origin. Meaning is not pasted onto a meaningless universe by frightened humans. Meaning is woven into the foundation because the foundation is not less than mind, not less than love, not less than life. Now someone may still say, but I cannot know that with certainty. And that honesty should not be mocked. There are things we do not know exactly. There are questions that remain too large for our hands. Faith is not the same as pretending the mystery is small. But unbelief should not pretend the mystery is small either. If we cannot stand outside reality and inspect the whole of it like an object on a table, then every ultimate worldview involves trust. The question is not whether you will trust. The question is what kind of trust you are practicing. To say there is no divine intention behind existence is not merely to lack belief. It is to trust that non-intention is the truer reading of the world. It is to trust that the ache for meaning is a side effect, that love is finally chemistry, that conscience is finally adaptation, that beauty is finally preference, and that existence is finally just there. A person may choose that, but it should not be advertised as no choice at all. It is a spiritual and philosophical posture. It is a way of standing before the abyss and deciding that the abyss is not looking back. The Christian does not answer the abyss by shouting louder. The Christian answers by looking at reality and saying, this depth is not empty. The world is strange because it is created. The heart longs because it was made for more than survival. Reason reaches because reason is not an accident detached from the source of being. Beauty wounds us because beauty is a sign, not merely decoration. Even suffering, though it remains terrible, becomes something we can bring before God rather than evidence that existence has no soul. This is why the question of God keeps returning. It returns after arguments. It returns after disappointment. It returns after people leave religion and still find themselves speaking to the silence. It returns because existence itself keeps pressing on us. The very fact that there is a world and that we can wonder about it already leans toward depth, not a shallow proof, not a cheap victory. A leaning, a summons, a hint that reality is more like a word than a stone. So if atheism means I reject cruel religion, then many believers should listen carefully. If atheism means I have not been persuaded by weak arguments, then the conversation can continue with respect. If atheism means I will not pretend certainty where I do not have it, then that can even be a kind of honesty. But if atheism becomes the confident denial that reality points beyond itself, then it has become more than caution. It has become a choice against the most natural question existence raises. It has decided that the world is not gift, not speech, not intention, not creation, before proving that decision from outside the world. That is the arbitrary move, not doubt itself, not grief, not honest searching. The arbitrary move is to stand in a universe filled with being and treat non-being of purpose as the default explanation. It is to see the door of mystery open and insist there is no room beyond it, because some people have described the room badly. The invitation is not to win an argument and walk away proud. Pride can ruin apologetics faster than ignorance. The invitation is to become honest before existence. Ask the question slowly: why is there anything here at all? Why does reality have depth instead of blankness? Why does the heart want truth, not only comfort? Why does beauty feel like a message? Why does conscience accuse even when no one is watching? Why does love feel more real than the chemicals that accompany it? These questions do not force faith like a machine forces an output. They open a path, and on that path, Christianity says the foundation of all things is not indifferent. The world is not self-explanatory emptiness dressed in temporary light. It is creation. It is gift. It is upheld by a God whose intention is deeper than our confusion. So the next time someone says atheism is simply neutral, listen gently, but do not surrender the deeper question. Before disbelief can call itself neutral, it must explain why nothing would have been more natural than something, and why the something we actually live inside keeps sounding like it was meant.